So I'm joining you. My name is Samantha Sitole. I'm a PhD. Actually, I used to be a PhD student. I'm a doctor of environmental science, and I'm joining you from the beautiful city of Harare in Zimbabwe. And I believe that we are here to discuss the most urgent and complex conversations around climate and conservation. So, the Trailblazer series is a youth and young professional led space under the Share Screen Africa. So, just briefly, nature based finance at its core is about putting financial value behind protecting nature. And this series on nature based finance is quite important because I'll illustrate it in terms of this tree. So, think of this tree. A tree does many things. It stores carbon, it helps regulate the climate, it protects soil, supports biodiversity, and provides shade, food, and livelihoods for communities. People pick apples, mangoes, different types of nuts, etc., and sometimes use the tree for bark, etc. So for years, these benefits were recognized ecologically, but not financially. So nature-based finance asks, what if we invested money to protect that tree because of the service it provides to people and the planet? So instead of cutting down the tree for short-term profit, finance is mobilized to conserve it. And because we're keeping it standing, it has climate, environmental, and social value. So when we scale this idea from a single tree, it turns into forests, wetlands, grasslands, and other ecosystems. And that's what we call nature-based finance. But remember, it does not exist in isolation. It exists alongside people. When we think about the tree or a forest or a wetland, there are often communities living with it and caring for those ecosystems every day. And these landscapes provide food, water, income, culture, and often identity too. So in previous sessions, like the previous session that we had Bancham, Aaron, and Herbert speak powerfully about the importance of community engagement in conservation and climate action, not as beneficiaries, but as partners. But they spoke a lot about making it sustainable. So as we talk about nature-based finance today, we must keep asking, when finance flows into protecting a tree or an ecosystem, how are the communities connected to these landscapes, etc.? Because the success and fairness of these nature finance projects ultimately depends on whether it works for both nature and people who steward it. But rarely do we see the community in these projects. And that's why we're here today. We're shifting the lens. It is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Deborah Sialo, with her talk titled Carbon Credits, Fair Deal or Hidden Exploitation. She brings a critical and deeply grounded perspective on carbon credits, one rooted not in theory, but in lived community realities in the Kenyan landscape and beyond. So Debbie is an environmental sustainability practitioner and climate resilience advocate, working at the intersection of ecosystems and community livelihoods across Kenya and Africa. As Executive Director of Strategic Sustainability Partnerships, she leads community-based land restoration and adaptation initiatives, and as an active voice for carbon credits, environmental justice, and inclusive conservation. She was recently mentioned in an article on how carbon credits are reshaping the landscape in Kenya. The link to the article will be posted in the chat so you can get a chance to look at it. So please, help me give a warm welcome to our beautiful speaker, Debbie Sialo. Debbie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much from everyone from all over the place. I am happy to be here for us to be able to engage. I believe that this is a conversation for us to engage with one another, that I can share my experiences, and hopefully I get to hear the experiences from some of you from wherever the countries that you're coming from. So carbon credits, is it a fair deal or hidden exploitation? Is it a fair deal or a hidden exploitation? It would be really good to also hear some insights from you guys. And as we begin, let's ask simple questions. Assume in an year, like you get $5 per year to protect ancestral forest, but you can no longer farm there. Is it a fair deal? you can help me because let's hear what the
Okay.
members have to say. Let's just get a
Yes.
little bit of a conversation to hear what they have to say. So you're paid to protect your ancestral forest, but you can no longer farm there, or you farm but with specific um you have already been given you see you've signed a contract, so there are things that you can do or you cannot do. You can farm but with conditions. Is it a fair deal? A project is labeled successful while communities they lose land access. Is that a fair deal or a hidden exploitation? As we continue to just think about all this, I would like to also put a disclaimer that carbon credit is not a bad concept. In fact, we are not activists fighting against carbon credits. Yeah, we are actually not fighting against carbon credits. But what we are actually trying to do is raise our voices as young people in the African countries from where we belong to say that, you know what, the policies that come with the carbon credits is where the gap is what we need to change. So if we can take up the carbon credit and support livelihoods and support our communities and support in terms of even green finance, climate finance, fine. But where the gap lies is that um, African countries, the policies have gaps. They have so many gaps in between. And most of these gaps fall into the community engagement. That is where most of the gaps fall into. But before we go ahead of ourselves, let's ask ourselves, like, first of all, for any new member anyone who is here and they don't know what a carbon credit is, yeah? Because I'm sure there are people that I don't know what a carbon credit is. So in simple terms, a carbon credit is a certificate that is issued for every 1 ton of carbon dioxide that is reduced or removed. So any for every 1 ton of carbon dioxide that you reduce or remove, then that becomes a 1 carbon credit. The credit is a certificate. But then when it comes down to us, it doesn't come as a certificate, like that certificates where you hold it like a marriage certificate, but it comes down now to us as money. So the carbon credit is, it comes down to us as money. Now, what is the promise? The promise is companies offset emissions by funding projects that reduce CO2. So the developed countries, they fund. So what they do is they continue with their projects, they continue with the processes that they have, they continue with the airlines, they continue to do the kind of programs or whatever they do, but then they offset their emissions as it is us that they use who projects based, for example, in Africa or other countries, Indonesia, or other countries to offset. So the offset is the removal or the removal of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So such projects include like forest conservation, renewable energy, tree planting, and such things. Those now are going to be converted into a credit. But now when it comes to reality, profit comes first. And communities, most times, they are the ones that get into the lose because they lose access to their land. They don't necessarily lose the whole access. What happens is, especially for projects that are land-based, there are land-based projects and there are non-land-based projects. So, for example, of land-based projects are projects like the forest conservation, tree planting, such things. But when it comes to non-land-based projects, these are projects like clean cooking stoves and such things. So, but when it comes, for example, to the land projects, communities have to come together, agree that we as a community have accepted that this particular area we will agree that this project of the carbon credit can come to us. So like we have agreed that we are going to do tree planting, or we are going to do rotational grazing on our land, then we will earn carbon credits from there. Now that is the reality. That is ideally what happens. But now when the money comes, when this profit comes, the communities are not told a few things. For example, these communities are not told how much was that land, what is the value of the land. I'll come and tell you, um, we want your land and we're going to do that. But you've not told me what is the value of my land. How much carbon credits are you earning from my land? So there's a bit of disclosure gap in terms of that information. So the communities don't know what is the value of their land. Then the other thing is the communities have to get into a contract with a project developer. This contract, they'll sign the contract for about 30 to even 40 years. So now assume you have signed a contract for 40 years. Let me ask you, in 40 years, where do you think, just picture it yourself, where do you think you'll be in 40 years? That's a question for you to answer. Carbon credits are usually long-term projects. Long-term projects, a minimum of about 25 years to a maximum of 40 years. That's how far you can get into a contract with a project developer. Now, once that happens, and now you're into a project, there are other project developers who tell you, because we have agreed to sign into this contract, then you cannot bridge any part of this contract. So let's say, for example, drought hit your country, and this is a community that does pastoralism, and now the drought hits your country, and I am not allowed to get into that grazing zone because it has been fenced off and we are not allowed to get in there. Some of the um, stories that we hear, or the things that are actually happening on the ground, are sometimes really unfair, because you can even get to the point of the project developer will tell you that you cannot, regardless, even if your animals are about to die, they cannot get into that land because it has been fenced off for carbon credits. And remember, this land is community land, or basically it is your land. You had your own culture as a community, or as yes, there are different communities have different cultures and such. So I hope we are together until there. So what happens is, compensation is not done as it should be. You can get, there are videos when you Google on YouTube. There are videos that that have been shared on YouTube, and communities are sharing the injustices that happen. You can get even a project developer who gets to a point of getting to that point of holding a gun at different communities, telling them you cannot graze here because we have to account for that carbon here. That is how far that carbon credits have taken us. And as a community, those are the things that we just want to raise and ask ourselves as Africans. Is this a policy gap? Is it a public participation gap that is there? What is the issue? Yeah. So that's part of the reality. So projects can proceed without meaningful local consent. So there are times you hear there is this project developer who is already doing carbon project, but they have not informed the community. They get into 2 years of the project. That's when they come in the community and tell them, yes, we are doing a project here, and this project is going to do this and this and this, and we are going to get credits from there. Yeah. So let's look at the numbers. Carbon market by the numbers. In terms of global voluntary carbon market, um, globally, carbon markets are, they're the new gold. Basically, carbon credits are the new gold. Look at these numbers. This is just the voluntary carbon market. Remember, there is the compliance carbon market and there's a voluntary carbon market. So globally, if the global market, we get about $2 billion, please calculate that into your currency, into your country's currency. Then you can tell how much of carbon credits is such a value. On a normal basis, most companies, they sell their average price of carbon credits for about $5 to $7. $7 is the highest, but in Kenya, most of them sell for about $3 to $5. Good. So, and in 1 in 6, credits are likely to deliver real reductions. You see the number? And this is a report from the Carbon Market Watch. You can go to Carbon Market Watch and you can get these reports from there. The evidence is from the Carbon Market Watch. So what this means, in short, is 1 in 6 credits is what is really likely to deliver real reductions. The rest, where does the rest go to? The other 5. So the 5 out of 6, where does it disappear into? Think about it. Let's take a case study in Zimbabwe, Karimba Red Plus project in Zimbabwe. This project is one of the largest carbon projects in Africa. Their project was going for about 785,000 hectares. They meant to protect 785,000 hectares. They sold it to Gucci, Netflix, Shell, etc. They generated about $50 million plus in revenue. The problem, the communities were restricted from land use. There was minimal benefit sharing, and the baseline inflated by about 400%. So, what is the community impact? The residents reported evictions without consultation. There was no access to firewood and grazing. There was zero carbon revenue, and some received $1 to $3 per household annually. This is a project in Zimbabwe. Let's take another project in Kenya. This is another project in Kenya. The project is from the Northern Rangelands Trust. This project, the conservation, it does conservation across indigenous lands, and then it is marketed as community-led. Yes. It is partnered with carbon brokers. It is also a project that supports, these indigenous communities in Kenya, like the Samburu, Borana, Rendile, because it lies in different counties in Kenya. They are also funded, not funded, but whoever buys their credits is Netflix, Meta, Shell, and a few other airlines. Those are the companies that buy the credits from them. Now, what is the problem? Just like the other case study from Zimbabwe, the problem is one, there are armed rangers and violence is reported. There's a link that you'll see on YouTube. There's a link that will be shared to you on YouTube. You can check out the YouTube link and watch those videos. So where residents of this community say that there are times that you graze in that particular area and there are rangers who can stand at gunpoint. And some are even killed. So ask me, would we kill our old souls because of our own land? In fact, the land is ours, the culture is ours, everything is ours. You're just coming to buy us. You're coming to buy us and preventing us from using our land. Then what we get in return is a few handouts here and there. School fees is paid for a few people here and there. So the benefit sharing is not equal. But in Kenya, recently we had a new regulation. And the regulation is the carbon market regulation. And the regulation states that there should be a minimum of 40% that is to go to the community. And then the other 60% now goes to the brokers, goes to the verifiers and such. But if you ask me, I think 60% should go to the community, and the other 40% goes to all the others. Because honestly, the land is ours. They are the polluters, and us, we are the ones who are helping to clean. Let's get this community testimony. Members beaten, according to Auckland Institute 2023, it states that members were beaten for grazing livestock, homes were destroyed, they were excluded from decisions, and one elder said, "We were treated as obstacles, not partners." This is exactly the core of this conversation, because carbon credits should come in and support the communities and not exploit us further. So if we are going to be treated as obstacles and not partners, is that fair deal? Okay. A few challenges, a few challenges in the carbon market is weak governance. For example, weak safeguards. If FPIC process has not been done as it should be, the community stakeholder engagement has not been done as it should, communities should be included before you decide to come and say that you want to do this project here. Please get consent from the community. Explain to them inside and out. Inside and out. Tell them that this project can change. This project can evolve from one to one form to the other. Explain everything. If you are a project developer and you're here, or you are planning to be a project developer, please ensure that you have done public participation 100%. For you to have a project that is going to succeed, then you need the public participation to be up. Because without the community, then that project might not go far. You might get your credits, but maybe for a year or two, but you might not get to that point of getting to 10 years, 30 years, or even 40 years, because the community are not going to stand with you. Also, if you use force, when you're using force, you're evicting people, you're burning their houses, you're killing people, is that really a fair deal? So free prior informed consent. And if you're also members of a community and you are leaders and you are elders somewhere seated and you have some say in your different areas, like in your different communities, ensure that you do not sign contracts that you do not understand. These contracts should be explained to you in your own language, in the language that you understand most, so that you understand what you are signing for. You don't sign a project for 40 years and you have no idea what you are signing for. Good. Another challenge is inadequate compensation. So there is the issue of benefit sharing. So when the communities and the project developers are not doing the benefit sharing, it also becomes a problem, because now communities, remember, this is their land. Everything, they should get 80% actually of everything. But because of the policies, the rules, and the regulations that have been set by either the national governments in different countries. But look at inadequate compensation. When there is inadequate compensation, then it becomes a challenge. Then there is the issue of power imbalance. International corporations, they hold the negotiating powers over local communities with limited legal resources. So there's the issue of the international corporations, especially because you see these international corporations, the verifiers, they are mostly international. They are not local. They're not actually local. They discuss things and set rules and powers without having a translator who can speak on behalf of the African communities. What is our hidden cost? Communities pay the price while corporations claim carbon neutrality. We pay the price. Is this a fair deal or hidden exploitation? So developed countries, they continue to pollute the environment. Then as we clean for them, then they pay us to clean the air. That's exactly what this slide is just talking about. Is it something that we call a fair deal? So I think what we are trying to say from this whole conversation is, as Africans, when we attend this COP series where the negotiations are done, let's not attend the series blindly. Let's know what we are carrying to go to this series. Yeah, to this COP series. Let's understand what exactly are we going to negotiate. It's easy for us to run to go to this um, uh, COP series. I attended the COP in Brazil. I attended this. It's one thing to attend, but it's another thing to actually show commitment to what you are saying and what you are doing. If you don't speak for us as Africans, and this is not activism, this is purely not, this is us just trying to understand how these processes work and the gaps that are present, and how we can be able to also help our policies improve so that we can be able to get better deals for us as a continent. A few pathways to equitable carbon solutions: mandatory benefit sharing. Let's strengthen FPIC protocols. Let's have community ownership models. Let's have grievance managements, and let's have legal reforms when it comes to indigenous land rights. Every community has their own land rights. So carbon credits, they are not bad. They are a valuable tool. I have said this and I keep saying it is a valuable tool. And many projects can actually succeed. Many projects have become successful. There are few communities that are actually successful. Uh, yeah, so carbon projects are not entirely bad. They're actually not entirely bad. It came in as a tool to help in climate action, and to support us in terms of mitigation and resilience. But now the challenge is, without proper safeguards, transparency, and community rights protection, then the well-intentioned projects can cause harm. One thing that I want you to understand is, carbon projects, mostly to us, it could be a technical thing, but to the world, it's now turning into a social and a political game. So even governments can want to have a say in this. And then also socially, we have even the communities. We all want to have a say in this. Yeah. So carbon markets can work for climate and communities with strong governance and respect for rights. So let's take another question. Consider this. A company in New York plants trees in Kenya to keep polluting. Who wins, us or them? How much to never use a resource you depend on for survival? Think about that. And let's understand if this is a fair deal or a hidden exploitation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah, for a very good presentation. And I like all the arguments you have put. Just to answer the question about the New York planting trees in Tanzania, for instance, I think it's them who are winning, because what they are doing is they are trying to keep their employment, their money, and everything flowing, and then they are denying other people to do the same, because a forest sector is a complete value chain. So if you stop people from harvesting, that means they are not doing anything in that particular land. They could have planted the trees, harvest, and process the timber and other products. Through the processing, that's where now they add value. They create employment and they do so many things. So all those opportunities are denied because we are told not to do anything in that particular land and they pay $5, and in most cases it's less than that $5. So I like what Deborah said. Is it's some sort of exploitation, because the opportunity cost is very, I see it's very high for these communities who are denied all activities, and then they are paid only 5 or 3 or 4 US dollar per ton of carbon that they are keeping, and then someone else is producing, is doing a lot of things out there, and a lot of people are being employed along the value chain. So in myself, I think it's not worthy doing that with that kind of price that they are paying.
I guess the previous respondent has already covered most of the ground, so I will not repeat what he said. But basically, when you want to look at the equation of who wins, it comes down to the pricing. These companies, they pay for tree planting in Kenya because it's cheaper for them to pay for this under the current pricing structure than reduce their own emission. It is a get out of jail card for them at the moment. So the critical thing is really the pricing, the carbon pricing structure is such that it is being determined by those who benefit from it, not by those who provide the product, in other words, who actually sequester the carbon. So there has to be a flip in terms of, these communities are basically reducing carbon. The community voice has to be such that they should be determining the price, make it so expensive for the other guys that they should stop polluting. At the moment, there is a major imbalance in the pricing. Who determines the price of the carbon? I think that's what comes down to. Thank you.
Thank you, Tai. And I think that's a very important point. Even the one of the previous person who asked the question, it's important because how do we then put the community at the forefront to actually determine the pricing? Isn't it a question about power imbalance or the ability to access spaces where these decisions are made at the end of the day? Because COP, for instance, it's attended by heads of state and organizations that can also afford to go to these spaces. So how feasible is it for communities to actually go? And I think someone's mentioned it in the chat, which we'll get to.
Yeah, some of the issues that I wanted to highlight have been raised, so I won't repeat the same. But for me, I think it's a win-win situation because, like I said before, that it's contextual. Because probably the company comes and wanted to plant some trees in a degraded area. So it would be beneficial to us. Of course, the issue of power imbalance that will also goes to a situation whereby the community is not being involved on price setting. I think that's where the foul play is.
I think the previous speakers have covered most of what I was going to say, especially Henry. It's contextual. It's all about how the process is implemented. Because if the plantation follows the same or the country's industrial laws or industrial principles, it still benefits the communities and still benefits the company. But as we know that these companies, as the previous speakers have already mentioned, that it's just for them to just exploit the countries. I think that's where the problem starts in terms of how we negotiate those partnerships from the get-go.
I want to respond to, and I agree with what you've just said, that the issue is, yes, I love the idea of a win-win situation, that the company in New York wins while us as a country, we also win. It's a good way to win-win. But now the issue is, who is negotiating? Okay. How come that in most carbon projects, the African countries are not the negotiators? As you are told, you'll buy this carbon credit for $5. And in most cases, it doesn't even get to $5. It can get to $3. It can get to... Yeah. So who is negotiating in terms of the value? I should be able to sell. In my case, I should, let me not say that. I would say that as African countries, we should put our foot high so that when they come with a proposal that they want to come and plant trees in our country, our value should also be high. And that's where Sam just said the inequality of negotiations. It is a win-win for us, but if we negotiate us the right way, our negotiation is what is going to buy us a better deal.
Henry says, I think the situation is contextual, which I've also seen other people say. We regard carbon credits as value addition. This is because we had our campfire program, which is running, and we are getting revenue from photographic and hunting activities. The carbon credit comes and revenue on the same land. The communities have not been restricted to fetch firewood in the communities, but in protected areas. So there's a difference, I guess, here, what he's talking about in terms of land use. Is that something you've seen in your areas as well, Debbie, in terms of land use? Like some areas are protected and therefore the community doesn't have access at all, and they're doing carbon sequestration or carbon credits in those areas versus land that the communities actually have access to?
What happens is it depends on the kind of project that the project developer is doing. So for example, if your project developer is doing rotational grazing and you're told you'll have to use this particular area for 14 days. After the 14 days, you move. Now remember, some of us are pastoralists. We don't own 5 or 10 number of cattle. We have several, like there are many. Now I have the many, someone else has the many, and we are told eat here, graze here for 14 days. Then you move to the other area for 14 days. When I'm told to graze here for 14 days, I am not allowed to get to the other area. So I will only stay here until the 14 days is over, then I move to the other area. So if I breach that contract and move to the other area before the 14 days are over, then I get very, the depends on the project developer again, because there are project developers who are very tough and very hard. So these are the kind of people that come and they stand at gunshot to the communities because they have grazed to the other area for 14 days. So I think it depends on the kind of project that the project developer is doing. Like we said, there are many different kinds of projects. There is the forest conservation. You can just be there to conserve the forest, and you will be allowed to still go in, collect firewood and do any kind of thing. But there are projects like rotational grazing where after the 14 days, we want to see some grass have, like, they could have already come out. Yeah. Now, take for instance that in this particular season where there is drought in my country, and I'm told not to graze there for 14 days, and I have animals here that need to eat. Please just look at that kind of scenario. What happens? Is there insurance for my livestock? So some of the questions that you being here, you need to, when you're part of the community, ask a few questions depending on the kind of project that the project developer is coming with to your community. Yeah.
Thank you for that response, Debbie. And I think it also now goes to what Taye wrote in the chat about FPIC, free prior informed consent. He says no project should be allowed to start on community land if there's no FPIC. And this was spoken about by our previous speakers in the previous session. If you were able to attend, they spoke at length about FPIC. And I think that's an important step, especially when we're talking about social safeguards. So we have Rebecca who says, are there any documented projects that are truly successful where the community is not losing out and are satisfied with how everything is playing out?
I take that. Okay. You can, I will respond this from my country because I don't know much about what other African countries are doing. There are many other countries that we can also get that information on different websites and Google. But I would say that carbon credits is a concept that is now being accepted and coming down to our country and our communities. So far, the projects that have already, like now in my country, there are several project developers that have gone through the project and they don't have any issues, especially projects that are not really, really tying the communities directly, especially issues of like grazing and such things. But when it comes to like projects such as forest conservation or clean cook stoves, we don't hear much of a problem with that. Projects that are successful are projects that mostly don't touch on especially on land-based. I don't know about others, but I know that land in the African concept is very sacred. Land is a sacred thing in the African communities. So you play with my land, you are playing with me. So most projects that are usually too much of land-based, then you won't miss a few hitches. But projects like clean cook stoves, those don't have an issue. They come in, they pass, communities benefit from them, and most of them, the issues are not too many. They get a win-win situation. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, Debbie. And I think it sort of touches on Lydia's question, which says, could you talk about the value of carbon credits in Africa versus Europe?
I'll refer you to Carbon Watch, and in there we can be able to get the records because they do so many reports in terms of carbon credits. So you can be able to compare what is the value of the carbon credits in Africa, in Europe, and in other countries.
So I'm just going to read some comments before I read the question from Serge. So Tom Geme says, it's not true that when a forest is up for carbon trade, harvesting is not allowed. And I think you touched on that as well, that sometimes harvesting is allowed depending on how the land use has been, what priorities are being set for that type of area. Rebecca says, instead of the company internally evaluating and reducing their carbon footprint, they cast it off to a country that they have nothing to do with. And I think that spoke to the second question we asked about who benefits between New York, for example, and Kenya. He says, but it's cheap and more convenient for the people in New York. We have another one from Grayson. It should be a win-win situation. If the community have knowledge about carbon market, but they don't have such a knowledge, how can it be a win-win situation? Which is a very good question. Because even when we speak about communities, right, they're not a monolith. So a community is not like a group of homogenous people. It's the same people. You have women, you have children, you have elderly people, you have people with disabilities or who are differently abled, and all those people have interests. For instance, women are carers in the household, so the way they deal with land or harvesting of products in these spaces is different from the way men, for example, would deal with the same land. And so even in addressing this issue, communities in themselves, when they negotiate, they don't negotiate on the interests of everyone. Because sometimes it's a certain group of people within that community who have the power or the influence to speak on behalf of everyone else. So it's not really a win-win if you look at it holistically and with the nuances intact. And I think this is where Deborah was going in terms of the international market versus what is here locally. Because do they really consider those intricacies when they're speaking about communities? Do they really consider the cultural value, the social value? What do we use our trees for? What do we use our grass for? Cultural sites like burial sites, do they consider all of that? So we have another question from Serge. He says, the concept, the project, and costs are coming from foreign and imposed to our countries. It is unfair business for communities. In this system, the best way to preserve the climate. What is the best way to preserve the climate changes? Can we find an adapted approach for our context?
I spend a lot of my days training and teaching communities, especially the community here in Kenya, the Maasai land, the Maasai community here. And one of the things that I keep telling my people is we as Africans, or rather we as Kenyans, or rather we as Maasai people, have been used to receiving handouts. We have received so many handouts from different organizations. So what happens is we are not able to think that we can do these projects by ourselves. So when we are able to do projects by ourselves, we are able to negotiate better. We are able to have a better negotiating seat at the table, because it means when we keep depending when we keep depending when you keep depending on these developed countries to come and invest with us, to come and help us to plant trees, it's just us saying, you know what, please come and do whatever you want to do with our country. We are open for you to do whatever you want. So that's the thing that we just want to change, even as people who are in Africa or something, in whatever in wherever you are coming from, spread the message that we are actually able to support ourselves and our communities without the handouts. But then the world or people have already made us know in our minds that we are not able. So if unless Netflix will come and buy our carbon credits, then we are not going to do rotational grazing. Rotational grazing is a concept that you were all taught in primary school. It's something that we can all take up, but we can only do it when there is money coming in. And that's the concept that we want to change. And as I said, and I will still repeat and say, a carbon credit is not bad. It is a tool that I advocate for because it's going to help us in terms of climate finance and support areas where we need to get some more income. But the challenge is not the money, but how it is designed, how it is priced, and how it is translated down to the community. This is what this conversation is about: the designing, the pricing, and the translation. Are we factoring in the risks? Are we factoring in how communities perceive it? Are there areas, the social risks, the political risks, such things? Yeah.
Mm. Thank you, Debbie. I just want to read a few more comments. Here, Lindokuhle says, I believe the other problem is even if we were to negotiate with these thoughts in I'm not sure what he was trying to say there. We're at the back foot because our communities are already struggling. So any source of short-term income seems acceptable relative to unemployment, which is true. When we're speaking about bread and butter issues, usually benefit sharing, especially when it's financial, seems like a better alternative than not having anything at all. Lulani says both Kenya and the company is going to benefit, but they will be unequally responsible and also unequal in revenue. I can see you guys were really going at it in the chat, and I'm going to try my best to cover as many of these comments as possible. Mark has said here, there's an intersection between the carbon pricing and emission reduction policies. At the moment, the pressure to reduce emissions is too low. The result is an economic value of carbon credit deals that is far removed from the long-term commitment of communities who create the asset. In these current conditions, it seems worthwhile to wait for prices of carbons to rise much at higher levels. Only then is just sharing of economic value possible. Restoring and preserving the natural environment can be justified for many reasons. Carbon pricing is just one. So that's quite interesting. Henry says here, I think the situation is also contextual. And you spoke about the Campfire Project. I think I read this comment already. My apologies. But something you said really stuck out to me as we close, Debbie, that that the question is not simple. Are we seen as obstacles to projects or partners in progress? So these are some quotable quotes that I teased out of what you were saying. Are we seen as obstacles to projects or partners in projects? You also said without visible and meaningful public participation, no project can go far. And global cooperation cannot claim to be inclusive when communities are excluded by language. That was very important because our communities normally don't speak English as a language of communication. And so to now dissect what is being said in these very complex documents that are written in very often technical language that people without that level of understanding would be able to comprehend for their local situation becomes a problem. And who translates that information for them, I think, is something that we need to also consider. Last comment, Tom says, what's important for creativity is for creativity. What else beyond carbon can we put for sale to increase earnings for the communities? Very good point. The answer lies in exploring monetizing other associated ecosystem services, such as the watershed conservation, biodiversity, etc. These have been such interesting comments and engagement in the chat. Thank you so much to everyone for really participating. I loved it. It was like football. One person is kicking the ball, the other one is receiving. Who scored? We don't know yet. So we're trying to figure out, is it a win-win, Deborah? What do you think? Are we still losing here? But yeah, thank you so much, Deborah. We appreciate your knowledge, your time, your expertise. Deborah, do you want to say any final words before we close off?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much to you, the Trailblazers, and for having me. And thank you for everyone that managed to join. My parting shot would be, you are here because you are able to stand in the gap for your country and for Africa. So do not be silent. When you are able to sit in a policy table, please sit and make the right policies for us as an African continent. We need the Africans to be the Africa that you want. Remember, the African that you want. So yeah, please be
Thank
there.
you for that.
Be there. Sit on that policy table. Sit on that wherever you are able to sit. Yes, and be there for the African continent. Let's have a win-win. Let's have a win-win situation. If they are winning, we should also win for our children, for our generations, for our land. Yeah.
And I love that call to action, win-win for Africa. This is a Pan-African platform, Share Screen Africa. If you are not registered for our talks, please go ahead and register. This is where the conversation happens. Because without platforms like this, how else would we from all these countries connect? This is the place to do it. Let's continue to connect with each other and continue the conversation, which we will have another talk on the 23rd of this month. So you are all welcome to register and connect with us again. And also, if you have a topic, if you have something you're passionate about, like Deborah had today, and look at how engaging you guys were. If you have something you need to say and you want to say it about our environment and you want to share it with us, please do not hesitate to email us. We'll have the email in the chat that you can email us if you want, if you have a talk, and we'll meet with you, we'll discuss, and we'll hear what your ideas are and what you want to say. But you are more than welcome to be the next speaker on the Trailblazers series. We are a group of young African people who are looking for African solutions under the Share Screen Africa platform and the Leadership for Conservation universe. So please, 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 guys, you are more than welcome. Continue this conversation. And remember, what you're doing is not just a drop in the ocean. You're creating vibrations that will lead to an impact somewhere, somehow. So let's continue the conversation here, guys. We have Gina has typed out the email address, stella@sharescreenafrica.org. Please copy and paste. You'll have maybe about 2 or 3 minutes before we close to copy and paste that, so that if you want to contribute to this conversation, you want to be a conversation and thought leader like Deborah today, if she inspired you, that's your place. Please email us. Make sure you get in touch. And remember, Share Screen Africa is the place to engage. So we'll see you next time on the 23rd of February. Thank you so much, everyone.